on accident.
I wasn't trolling. Let's get to Anthony Slater of The Athletic, covers the Golden State Warriors. You hear him here on 95.7 The Game, and this morning he dropped a story that said Jonathan Kuminga, sources around Jonathan Kuminga basically saying he's disgruntled and he doesn't believe in Steve Kerr, doesn't think he can develop to his potential under Steve Kerr. And Anthony, welcome. And I kind of feel like you put some, it became tangible what we've all kind of sensed over the last year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this kind of dates back to the playoffs last year, right? I mean, if you remember, Wiggins left the team for a personal matter right before the All-Star break and did not play at all after the All-Star break. Jonathan Kuminga, I don't remember his exact minute totals the last couple months last year, but they were high. And He was good. And although last season is viewed as this, waste, they were actually, they climbed to the 6th seed. Remember that? They were pretty hot down the stretch, and a lot of that was Kuminga. And then Wiggins showed up for the playoffs, and Gary Payton came back from injury, and Kuminga faded from the rotation. And I think there was some confusion at that time of, after doing as well as he did, why he wasn't, trusted to be part of the playoff rotation as that season faded away. And then there was hope, I believe, coming into this year that he would grasp a bigger role. And obviously that's been up and down. Remember the Portland game where he's completely out of the rotation to start and then finishes the final 17. And then obviously last night's kind of the latest example.
Yeah, Anthony, I got so much I want to say to you. I got to slow down because I'm like a jukebox. I'll start here.
Go ahead.
Coach Kerr, to me, every coach is like a great chef. It's their job to know just how much ingredients of whatever spice they're using. They know just how much. And I've been frustrated from Coach Kerr this season because, why didn't Kuminga play? Wiggins was in. They can't play together. Why did Moody play? Pods was in. To me, I'm like, and Coach Kerr has all the accolades, Slates, but at the end of the day, you got 48 minutes. But last night, after Kuminga took 7 trips to the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, you watch an 18-point lead dwindle, and not one time did an assistant coach or Kerr think to put Kuminga in the game. Anthony, what if I told you I don't think Kerr and Kuminga's relationship can come back for where I believe it is now with what you reported from Kuminga's camp and what he said last week?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think there's a month till the trade deadline. I think there's a lot of question marks on the future of this team. A handful of players who I think we'll find out a lot more by the trade deadline, and we'll find out where this front office wants to take this thing. I think if Kuminga's playing steady, consistent minutes. I mean, he has started the last 11 straight games, but the other thing that I think is mixed in here. This is huge. This is an important financial moment in Jonathan Kuminga's life, really. Right? He's extension eligible this summer. This is when you usually find out if you do or don't get that next big contract. And I just think with everything going on, Steve Kerr mentioned it the other day, right? Remember when he was kind of hinting at personal agendas getting in the way, and then Klay Thompson did his press conference. So I think eyes were on him, but that wasn't just directed necessarily at one player, right? That was a locker room comment. And the one thing I will say about Steve Kerr is I do think the job this season is very challenging. The mix, the amount of players that should probably be in the rotation, but also the veterans that have earned it who aren't playing well. I mean, we've talked about it all year, but this is not an easy mix to coach, I would say.
Anthony Slater joining us on 95.7 The Game. He's our NBA insider. Let me ask you about an issue within an issue, because I do think it's important. And it's Kuminga and Wiggins. And it feels to me like Steve Kerr just doesn't think they can play together. I don't either, to tell you the truth. I mean, of course they can play together, but I don't think it's a recipe for a really good team. If you don't think they can play together for 20 minutes, don't you have to move one of them?
Well, I'll get to the kind of the second point after, but the first, minus 66 in 131 minutes is the number. This is a team that relies on its analytics department, looks at lineup data and 2-man combos, 3-man combos, and makes decisions that way. And they see the same numbers that anybody can see if you look into it. But there's also a feeling internally that they have to find a way to get those two on the court together, because if you're going to defend in the playoffs, you need wings in the NBA, right? So it's, but there are. I believe Steve Kerr, like about a week ago, used the term redundant when he was talking about
exactly.
Things. Yeah. And so they're trying to find a mix maybe around them, a 3-player mix that might help. But to your point, yeah, I mean, it may come down to it where Mike Dunleavy has to choose one or the other. And that decision needs to be made before February 8th, basically.
Anthony, you're around this team you heard that, Steiny. You're around this team every day. And Steiny tells me, Goo, leave the youngsters alone. It starts with the big three or whatnot. And I say all that to say is I don't want to bash Steve Kerr. I don't want to make this about it, but are you okay with Moses Moody, who I'm not telling you is James Worthy, but are you at all shocked at where he's at in regard to these DMPs and him not just being able to make any contribution to this team? Because, Anthony, 30-some-odd games in, I am shocked at how small of a sample size Moody's got to make an impact on this team.
Yeah, especially because, I mean, generally I'd say he's done well with his minutes. I think we'd all kind of agree with that. But it's part of this, extreme depth mix that you think is a positive, but at times has been a negative. And Podziemski's rise, and I think we can all understand playing Brandon Podziemski plenty. He's been good. He's been helpful, in ways they need. He rebounds like crazy. He's, an extra ball handler, but it's also, if you're Moses Moody or Jonathan Kuminga, who the last couple of years have been told, that you're too young to help win right now. Well, now you're watching a 19-year-old rookie at times play ahead of you, particularly Moody, looking at Podziemski, for example. And these are just dynamics that are at play, obviously, at all times. But, yeah, I've been a little surprised. But Moody, I mean, Kerr keeps referring to it as a numbers game, and I know that feels like an excuse, but, I mean, that's just the reality. He's placed people ahead of him, and you can't really play 11 guys in an NBA rotation, and he's just decided Moody's 11.
Anthony Slater joining us on 95.7 The Game, our NBA insider. Let me ask you this, because there's always a tendency the Warriors lose a game like last night, and then we find out through your story at The Athletic that Kuminga's unhappy, and there's always a tendency among the fan base to think that everything just started right now. And I'm wondering, asking you, when you think about a Mike Dunleavy, we don't know anything about him as a GM. And we know a little bit about Laker, but where do you think those guys are right now in terms of assertiveness to make an aggressive move to try to get out of this?
I think that they are using the next month, next 3 weeks to really kind of assess which move needs to be made. I do think a move will be made. I'll say that. Like in past years, I felt going into the deadline that, there's a decent chance they just don't do anything. I'm not feeling that way this time around. I'm not feeling that, they think one loss to the Nuggets and, one report means, hey, before they tip off against Detroit tonight,
right,
something needs to go down. But I do think that, this is all swirling into the mix in their decision-making, which I do think, like I said, a decision is coming. And I also think the other thing that we haven't talked about, Draymond Green's nearing a return at some point, and that adds 30 more. That adds another high-minute guy into the mix that's going to take minutes away from others, particularly, Kuminga is probably part of that mix we're talking about. And I think they want to see the team with Draymond, too, before they make the big decision. But I guess to answer your question, I think it will be likely an aggressive deadline for them.
Do you think it'll be, real quick, it'll be an aggressive move that will say, boy, they're taking one last crack at a championship, or, they may get worse from that move?
It's a good question. They keep saying they're still believing they can win this year. It needs to be to help this team this year, this core, this, Curry era. But I at least think it's fair at 16 and 18 with the way this is wobbling, with what is potentially even out there on the trade market, that you could take a step back and go, should you kind of try to reset and retool for later? Not a full rebuild, but kind of a reset for next year and the season beyond. Because I don't know that there is this fix-all out there that gets you in true contention.
Anthony, I work with a wordsmith. You're a wordsmith, especially when you put them in print like you do. And I got to tell you, a lot's been happening with words around the Warrior camp. And to hear Kerr say about Draymond that you just mentioned, we needed time from him. He needed time for us. I told Steiny and the listeners, oh, my goodness, that doesn't sound imminent or close. And then Woj breaks a story yesterday that he thinks Dre is getting ready to come back. What are you hearing? And did those words from Kerr have you thinking, okay, we're further than closer than Draymond coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I had been a little surprised that, he hadn't been around because early in the suspension process, they hinted that he would, maybe be around practice some when he could. But they just decided it was better to not have him in the mix. But it does sound like, his return to the facility is coming soon, and a lifting of his suspension is likely near. And that just honestly adds another layer into the mix of this season that, like, can you believe it's not even halfway through this NBA season right now with just everything that has happened with this team? Like, and they're so, like, if they just go on like a nice little streak, like they're right back in this mix, because I don't think the Western Conference is running away from them, but I don't know why you would believe they're going to also go on some tear either.
Right. You sound like Steiny.
Hey, Anthony, thanks as always, man. Good story today in The Athletic, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, fellas.
All right, Anthony Slater, The Athletic.
He sounds